The phone call that shattered my peaceful life didn't start with a scream, but with a whisper. A terrified whisper from the woman I had hired to clean my empty house. "Ma'am," she breathed into the phone, her voice trembling so badly I could barely make out the words. "Is there anyone else in the house?" That single, whispered question was the first thread pulled from the tapestry of my life, a tapestry that would soon unravel to reveal a horror hidden in the shadows of my own home for 30 years. That morning, I had woken with a clear purpose. The coastal rains were due to return to Savannah soon, and with them, the heavy, clinging humidity that makes every speck of dust feel like a personal failure. I wanted the house to be spotless. I had rolled up my sleeves, grabbed a cleaning rag, and stood ready in front of the living room window, determined to tackle the day's work with vigor. Just as I began wiping the glass, my phone vibrated in my pocket. I glanced at the screen and felt a warm rush of nostalgia. It was Yvette, my dearest childhood friend, whom I hadn't seen in many years. Her cheerful voice filled my ear as she explained she was passing through Savannah for just one day and wanted to meet for coffee. How could I possibly say no? We had shared so many memories, running through open fields, staying up late into the night sharing our dreams. My heart ached to see her, but the reality of the messy house loomed large. I couldn't leave it in such a state. Then, I remembered Brianna Parrish, a kind, soft-spoken young woman in her 20s who lived in the alley near my home. She was working hard to pay for her college classes and was always grateful for extra work. I called her, and she immediately accepted. I gave her precise instructions: clean the study, scrub the stairs to the second floor, and above all, be careful with the old, dusty shelves that belonged to my husband, Jerome. I left a spare key for her and asked her to lock up tightly when she was finished. With that sorted, I drove to the Magnolia Tree Cafe, where Yvette was waiting. We sat beneath the sprawling branches of a live oak tree, the dappled sunlight dancing around us. She told me about her life in the city, her now-grown children, and I shared stories of my husband, Jerome, his successful career as a published novelist, and my own tranquil, if sometimes lonely, days. We laughed, reminiscing about old times, and for a beautiful hour, I was transported back to a simpler, happier past. In the middle of our conversation, my phone rang again. I saw it was Brianna and smiled, assuming she was calling to say she was done. But when I answered, I didn't hear her usual shy voice. Instead, I heard ragged, agitated breathing, as if she was trying to contain a panic. "Miss Simone," she whispered, her voice so shaky I could barely hear it. "Is there anyone else in the house?" My heart stuttered to a stop. "No," I replied, forcing my voice to sound calm. "I'm having coffee. My husband is at his publisher's and won't be back until tonight." "Why do you ask, Brianna?" There was a terrifying silence on the other end, broken only by her harsh breaths. Then, her voice broke. "There's a woman upstairs." I was cleaning the stairs and I saw her. She was wearing a long white dress, and her hair was a mess. She walked down the hallway and disappeared into the last room. Her words felt like an ice-cold knife plunged directly into my chest. I tried to stay composed, but the hand holding my phone began to tremble violently. My first, frantic thought was of an intruder. Our house was over 70 years old, but we were always so careful, locking every door and window. How could someone have gotten in? I quickly apologized to Yvette, telling her there was an emergency at home. Her face was etched with worry, but I just shook my head, unable to form a proper explanation. Her words felt like an ice-cold knife plunged directly into my chest. I tried to stay composed, but the hand holding my phone began to tremble violently. My first, frantic thought was of an intruder. Our house was over 70 years old, but we were always so careful, locking every door and window. How could someone have gotten in? The streets of Savannah seemed to stretch on endlessly that day, even though I was flooring the accelerator. When I finally swerved onto my cobblestone driveway, a police cruiser was already parked out front. Brianna was hunched on the front steps, her face as pale as chalk, her eyes wide with pure terror. I rushed to her, wrapping my arms around her shaking shoulders. "Are you okay?" I asked, my voice thick with fear. Did you see anything else? Brianna just shook her head, her lips pressed into a thin, white line as if she was afraid to let a single sound escape. Two police officers, one middle-aged with a serious demeanor and a younger one, emerged from my house. They reported that they had checked every corner, every room, every closet, under the beds, and even the backyard shed. There was no one. There were no signs of forced entry. Every door and window was securely locked, without a single scratch or mark. A wave of relief washed over me, but it was immediately followed by a deep, unsettling unease. Brianna, still trembling, insisted, I swear I saw her, Miss Simone. She didn't look real. She was like a shadow. I won't dare go up to the second floor again. I stroked her shoulder, trying to offer comfort, but a seed of doubt had been planted in my mind. This old house, which had belonged to Jerome's family before we moved in, had always had a certain presence. Its brick walls, creaking wooden floors, and dark corners had often felt like they were holding secrets. But a woman? It seemed impossible. Just then, I heard the familiar sound of Jerome's sedan pulling into the driveway. He got out, his face a mask of surprise at the sight of the police car and our little huddled group. I took his arm and quickly explained what had happened. I expected him to share my worry, to be as concerned as I was about this breach of our safety. But Jerome only offered a faint, almost dismissive smile. He approached Brianna, patted her shoulder, and said in a soft, condescending tone, You must have been tired, honey, and confused a reflection or a shadow. Our house is old. It has many corners that play tricks on the eyes. Brianna lowered her head, saying nothing more. I looked at her, my heart heavy. I knew she wasn't a fanciful girl. She was hardworking, pragmatic, and honest. She had no reason to invent such a terrifying story. Yet, Jerome's calm demeanor, his rational explanation, began to make me doubt my own instincts. Maybe he was right. Perhaps it was just a trick of the light, a product of fatigue and an overactive imagination. Feeling a flush of bitter embarrassment, I apologized to the police for the trouble. I paid Brianna for her time, asked her to go home and rest, and promised I would call her if I needed her again. 3 months later, I officially retired. The frantic rush of work mornings, endless meetings, and racing against deadlines was replaced by a new, quieter rhythm. The old Savannah house became my entire world. But with this change of pace came sleeplessness. I would lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, listening to the relentless ticking of the grandfather clock in the darkness. During those wakeful nights, I began to notice strange sounds emanating from the attic. At first, they were slight, almost imperceptible, a soft thud, as if something small had fallen. I convinced myself it was just the wind whistling through the old window frames or the natural creaking and settling of aged wood. But gradually, the noises became more distinct, more deliberate. I started to hear a slow, heavy scraping, like a chair being dragged across the floor. Then came light, constant footsteps, pacing back and forth. Sometimes, I even heard the faint rustle of paper, as if someone were quietly turning the pages of a book. One morning over breakfast, I finally gathered the courage to mention it to Jerome. I tried to keep my voice steady, but the unease was evident. Honey, I've been hearing noises in the attic lately. It's not the wind. It sounds like someone is up there. Jerome merely yawned, not looking up from his newspaper. It's just rats, Simone, he said distractedly. Our attic is old, full of clutter. It's a mouse paradise. I'll buy some traps tomorrow. We'll set them, and that will be that. True to his word, he brought home several large metal traps the next day. He placed them at the foot of the ladder leading to the attic, right beneath the old wooden hatch. There, he said, dusting off his hands. Now you can sleep soundly, my love. Oddly, the noises ceased completely after that. No more footsteps, no scraping chairs, no rustling paper. I sighed with profound relief, convincing myself that Jerome had been right all along. It was just mice, and I had let my imagination run away with me. But then, the strange occurrences began in earnest. They were small things, but impossible to ignore. I bought a package of spicy sausage from the local market, a particular favorite of mine. Jerome, on the other hand, had always detested spicy food. He wouldn't even taste a dish if it had too much black pepper. I carefully wrapped the sausage and stored it in the refrigerator, looking forward to enjoying it over the weekend. The next morning, when I opened the fridge, I froze. A large, irregular chunk was missing from the sausage. The cut was jagged, as if made in haste. Puzzled, I called out to Jerome, who was reading in the living room. "Did you take some of the sausage from the fridge?" He looked up, frowning as if my question was absurd. I felt like trying something spicy yesterday, so I cut off a little piece," he replied offhandedly. "It was good, actually." I stood motionless, unsure of what to say. This was completely out of character for him. A cold knot of doubt tightened in my chest. A few days later, the remainder of the sausage vanished entirely. I searched the refrigerator and the trash, but found no trace of it. This time, I didn't ask Jerome anything. The uncomfortable feeling within me was now a solid block of ice. Then, one Saturday, we drove to Charleston to visit friends. We left early in the morning and returned late that night. The house was silent and still. I went upstairs to the second-floor bathroom to wash my face. As I stepped inside, my sandals sank into something cold and damp. The floor was soaked. I looked around and saw water droplets still glistening on the shower walls. My heart hammered against my ribs. No one had been home all day. "Jerome," I called, my voice trembling. "Come here, please. The bathroom is soaked, like someone just took a shower." He entered, glanced at the puddle, and shrugged. "It must have been the afternoon rain. It probably came in through the ceiling vent, my love." I looked out the window. The street below was bone dry under the glow of the streetlights. "It hasn't rained, Jerome," I said, struggling to maintain my calm. He frowned, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face. "Then it must be a leak in the old pipes. You always worry about nothing. I'll call a plumber tomorrow." But he never called a plumber. In the days that followed, the bathroom floor remained dry, as if the entire incident had never happened. I checked the vent and the pipes, everything was perfectly normal. Jerome's explanation, while logical on the surface, failed to melt the icy unease growing inside me. The attic noises, the disappearing sausage, the inexplicable puddle of water, they were like scattered puzzle pieces, and when I tried to fit them together, they formed a picture I was afraid to see. A week later, I decided to clean Jerome's study. It was his sanctum, a room filled with floor-to-ceiling oak bookshelves burdened with hundreds of books and old documents. I thought it was time to donate some of the books we never read to the local library. As I began sorting through the stacks on his desk, my hand trembled, and a heavy pile of papers spilled onto the floor. The sound was shockingly loud in the quiet room. As I bent down to gather them, a small, stubborn wooden drawer in the desk, one that had been jammed shut for years, suddenly sprang open with a sharp click. Hesitantly, I peered inside. Beneath a heap of yellow drafts, I found a small, hardback notebook. It had a dark brown leather cover, worn at the corners, and was tied with a loose cord. It looked ancient, completely out of place amidst Jerome's modern laptops and pristine stationery. A mix of curiosity and dread filled me as I lifted the notebook with trembling hands. I opened the first page. Inside, the pages were filled with elegant, flowing handwriting, unmistakably a woman's. I skimmed through them. They were story outlines, character sketches, plot ideas. One fragment described a small mountain town where a woman waited endlessly for a lover who would never return. Another hinted at a buried secret, with details that made my skin prickle. These ideas, while distinct, had a hauntingly familiar tone. They echoed the themes and settings of Jerome's most celebrated novels, the very books that had made him famous. My heart hammered, and my throat went dry. This couldn't be a coincidence. I knew my husband. He hated writing by hand. He found it slow and messy, a relic of the past. Every word he wrote, from novel drafts to shopping lists, was typed on his computer. So whose notebook was this? I sat in his chair, the little book feeling like a lead weight in my hands. Part of me wanted to confront Jerome the moment he returned, to demand an explanation. But I hesitated. I knew him too well. He had a gift for making the illogical sound perfectly reasonable. He would smile that charming smile and tell me it was a gift from a reader, or an old experiment from his youth. And I, as I had so many times before, would nod and let the matter drop into silence. But not this time. This time, I couldn't let it go. Carefully, I placed the notebook back into the drawer and pushed it all the way to the back, hiding it as if it were a secret that, if discovered, could shatter everything. That night, sleep was a distant shore I could not reach. Lying in bed, I watched the play of moonlight on the ceiling, my ears straining against the silence, listening for any sound from above. The house was quiet, but the notebook's presence in the desk drawer felt like a loud, accusing pulse. Around 2 a.m, a soft, distinct creak echoed from the hallway. It was a small sound, but in the dead of night, it was as clear as a shout. My heart leaped into my throat. I didn't know why, but my mind immediately flew to the small, often forgotten door that led to the attic. I sat up abruptly, my body tense. I got out of bed without turning on the light, afraid that the truth would shatter in the glare. The faint moonlight streaming through the window was just enough to see by. I crept into the hallway and froze. The attic door was slightly ajar. A cold, damp draft seeped from the opening, carrying with it the unmistakable scent of old paper and stale, confined air. I stood rooted to the spot, paralyzed by a mixture of fear and a desperate need to know. I went back to the bedroom and gently shook my husband's shoulder. "Jerome, wake up. The attic door is open." He groaned, half asleep, and rose with an irritated sigh. He slipped on his slippers and marched ahead of me down the hallway without a word. But when we arrived, the door was firmly closed, the latch securely in place as if it had never been touched. I stared at it, searching for any sign, a scratch, a misalignment, anything. There was nothing. Jerome turned to me, his face a mask of tired disappointment. "Simone," he said, his voice grave and exhausted. "You've been too tense lately. You aren't sleeping well. That's why you're seeing things that don't exist. Come back to bed now." He led me back to the bedroom. I lay down, but my eyes remained wide open, fixed on the ceiling. For the first time, a chilling thought took root. Was he right? Was my mind, burdened by suspicion, beginning to conjure phantoms? In the days that followed, I tried to maintain an outward appearance of normality, though the unease was a constant, gnawing presence inside me. I began to watch Jerome's every gesture, his every word, with a new, hyper-aware intensity. I noticed he had developed a new habit, one that only deepened my suspicions. Around 10 o'clock each night, when I was already in bed with a book, he would announce that he needed to continue working in his study. "I need to concentrate a little, Simone," he would say in a soft but firm voice. "The manuscript is at a complicated part. You go to sleep first." I would nod and smile, but every time the study door clicked shut, I felt an invisible chasm opening wider between us. One night, I woke up parched. The clock on the bedside table showed nearly 1 a.m. I reached out to touch Jerome's side of the bed, but my hand met only cold, empty sheets. A jolt of alarm shot through me. Where was he? I slipped on a thin robe and ventured into the hallway, thinking he might have fallen asleep at his desk, a common occurrence when his publisher's deadlines weighed heavily on him. The dark hallway was filled with strange, shifting shadows cast by the faint light from the living room. I pushed open the study door, but the room was empty. The computer screen was dark, the chair tucked neatly under the desk, as if no one had been there for hours. "Jerome?" I called out softly, my voice echoing in the silence. There was no reply. I went down to the kitchen, thinking he might have gone for a glass of water, but it, too, was empty. Only the moonlight illuminated the space, making the shadows of the dishes on the shelves look like spectral figures. A growing sense of dread propelled me through the house as I called his name, my voice growing shakier with each step. My heart pounded a frantic rhythm, as if it sensed I was on the verge of a terrible discovery. As I passed the staircase leading to the second floor, I heard a faint, almost imperceptible footstep. I looked up and, in the dim glow of the hallway light, saw a silhouette slowly descending. It was Jerome. He was barefoot, moving with exaggerated care, as if desperate not to make a sound. In his hand, he carried a porcelain plate, the kind we used for special weekend dinners. When his eyes met mine, they widened in shock. The plate slipped from his grasp, hit the stone floor with a sharp, shattering clang, and broke into a dozen pieces. The sound tore through the silent house, making me jump back. I looked at the fragments, confused. The plate was clean, devoid of any food residue or grease, as if it had been freshly washed. This detail only deepened my bewilderment. "What were you doing up there at this hour?" I asked, my voice trembling. "I thought you were in the study." He bent down and began slowly picking up the pieces, avoiding my gaze. "I got stuck on the ending of the book," he said, his tone forced. "The editor won't stop pressuring me, you know. I needed a completely quiet place, so I went upstairs for a while. I got hungry and took up some food." He gestured vaguely at the broken plate. I knelt to help him, my mind reeling. When our fingers brushed against the cold ceramic shards, I felt a shiver of profound distance. The hand that had once offered me so much comfort now felt alien and cold. I knew he was under immense pressure from his publisher, Mr. Sterling. The constant calls did keep him on edge. Maybe, I tried to convince myself, he just needed a solitary space to think. Maybe I was overreacting, seeing conspiracies in the dark. The next morning, the house felt heavy, blanketed by an invisible cloud of tension. I woke exhausted, my head swimming with unanswered questions. Jerome, avoiding my eyes, had risen earlier than usual. I heard him moving silently in the kitchen, the soft clink of porcelain, but there was no customary good morning. He locked himself in his study, closing the door with a firm finality that told me he did not want to be disturbed. I stood in the hallway, looking at that solid wooden door, my heart a lead weight in my chest. Near noon, Jerome emerged, dressed in a gray suit and carrying a small suitcase. He paused in the living room where I sat with a cup of long cold tea. "I need to go away for a few days," he stated in a flat, emotionless voice. "Maybe to Atlanta. I need a change of scenery for inspiration." I looked up, surprised. Jerome never took trips without careful planning and discussion. "Why so suddenly?" I asked, trying to sound calm despite the frantic beating of my heart. He didn't look directly at me, his gaze fixed on the window where sunlight filtered through the dusty panes. "The idea just came to me suddenly," he replied, his tone monotonous. "Be careful while I'm gone." But just as he was about to walk out the door, he suddenly turned back. He placed his hands on my shoulders, his grip uncomfortably strong, making me flinch. "Simone," he said, his voice low and serious, "while I'm away, don't let anyone in. Do you hear me? Especially no one from the publishing house. If Mr. Sterling comes looking for me, tell him I went on a trip and that know when I'll be back." I nodded, but a deep feeling of foreboding settled in my stomach. His words didn't sound like a simple request, they felt like a command, a warning. Jerome had been gone for about 2 hours when the doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and saw Mr. Sterling, Jerome's editor, standing next to a young assistant. Both wore expressions of impatience. I hesitated, my hand on the doorknob, Jerome's warning echoing in my mind. But I couldn't simply hide. I took a deep breath, opened the door, and forced a smile. Mr. Sterling didn't wait for an invitation. He brushed past me into the living room, his face a thundercloud. "Miss Whitlock," he said, his voice harsh. "I know Jerome is home. Stop covering for him. We need the manuscript urgently." The deadline was 2 weeks ago. Trying to keep my composure, I repeated the line Jerome had given me. "I'm sorry, Mr. Sterling, but Jerome left this morning to seek inspiration. I don't know when he'll return." Mr. Sterling let out a short, derisive laugh that chilled my blood. He pointed toward the house across the street. "Don't lie to me anymore," he said sharply. "Mr. Hamilton told me he sees the attic light on until very late every night. If Jerome is working that hard, he should have the manuscript ready, not be hiding like a coward." The young assistant, a woman with kind eyes, stepped forward. "Ma'am, we just want to help. If Mr. Jerome is struggling with writer's block, he should talk to us. We can support him." Her tone was gentle, but I could no longer focus. Mr. Sterling's words had struck me with the force of a physical blow. The attic light. I had never noticed it. We almost never went up there. It was a space full of old boxes and cobwebs. Why would a light be on? And why would our neighbor see it every single night? My heart seemed to stop in my chest. I managed to usher them to the door, promising to contact Jerome as soon as I had news. But as I closed the door and leaned against it, my entire body trembled. My mind raced, connecting the scattered fragments. The noises in the attic, the missing sausage, the wet bathroom floor, the mysterious notebook, the empty plate Jerome carried, and now the light. Every single thread led to the same, forgotten place, the attic. The fear I had felt moments before was now replaced by a cold, steely determination. It was a silent flame burning within me, pushing me to uncover the truth, no matter how terrible it might be. I went to the backyard shed. The air inside was thick with the smell of dust and old oil. I searched until I found the old folding ladder we hadn't used since we first moved in. It was heavy, caked in grime and cobwebs, as if time itself had abandoned it there. I dragged it through the house and into the second-floor hallway, each step feeling like I was carrying the weight of all my accumulated suspicions. I placed the ladder directly under the hatch that led to the attic. My heart was pounding, but not from fear anymore. It was an urgent, primal need to know. The metal latch was stiff with rust. I had to grit my teeth and push with all my strength until it finally gave way with a sharp, metallic click that sounded like a final warning. I lifted the hatch door, and a wave of damp, suffocating air washed over me, carrying the thick, cloying scent of old paper and years of confinement. The smell turned my stomach, but I did not stop. I turned on my phone's flashlight. The cold, white beam cut through the oppressive darkness. I took a deep, steadying breath and began to climb. Each rung of the ladder creaked under my weight, the sounds echoing in the silence, as if guiding me toward a truth I was no longer sure I wanted to face. The attic was larger and more cluttered than I had remembered. It was a cavern of shadows, filled with stacks of cardboard boxes, old furniture shrouded in dusty white sheets, and cobwebs that hung like ghostly curtains. The only light came from a small, grime-covered window, casting weak, opaque beams onto the wooden floor. I swept the flashlight beam across the space, my heart hammering so violently I felt it in my throat. And then, in the farthest, darkest corner, I saw it, a small, organized space, an oasis in the midst of the chaos. A wooden table, a chair with a broken leg, and an oil lamp casting a dim, yellowish glow. And there, seated with her back to me, was a woman. She was painfully thin, with long, white, tangled hair that cascaded over her shoulders like a forgotten waterfall. She wore a yellowed white dress, its edges frayed and torn. The only sound was the soft, persistent scratch of a pencil on paper, a faint heartbeat of secret life. I stood paralyzed, my throat clenched shut. I tried to speak, but only a strangled whisper emerged. Who is there?" The scratching stopped. The woman turned her head slowly. Under the faint, dying light of the oil lamp, her face was revealed, gaunt, pale, and etched with a profound weariness. But within that tired face was something else, something hauntingly familiar that made my entire world tilt on its axis. My legs gave way, and I had to clutch a nearby old trunk to keep from collapsing. It was Alana. My sister. The face I hadn't seen in 30 years, a face that existed only in my dreams and in faded photographs. Alana, whom my entire family believed was lost to us forever, was here, in the attic of my own home, in a state that shattered my soul. The world seemed to shrink to that single, dust-filled point of light. The air left my lungs, and for a moment, I was certain I would faint. Alana? The name was a ghost on my lips, a whisper from a past I had long since buried. My sister, whose vibrant smile I had mourned for 3 decades, was now a pale, fragile specter before me. She looked at me, her sunken eyes wide with a mixture of shock and a profound, weary recognition. Her dry lips trembled, struggling to form a word. Sister. Simone. Her voice was a rusty hinge, unused and broken. It was all she could manage before her body seemed to fold in on itself, racked by silent, shuddering sobs. I no longer heard the creaking house or the distant city sounds. Hot tears streamed down my face, but a fierce, protective instinct overpowered my shock. I rushed to her side, my legs unsteady. Alana, I sobbed, my voice cracking. I took her thin, bird-like arm, feeling the delicate bones beneath her cold skin. Come downstairs. Come down right now. I helped her stand. Her body was light, insubstantial, as if years of confinement had hollowed her out. Her steps were hesitant and shuffling, as if her legs had forgotten how to walk on level ground. Guiding her down the ladder was a delicate, heartbreaking process. The bright light of the hallway seemed to pain her, and she shielded her eyes, a creature of the shadows suddenly exposed to the sun. I led her to the living room and carefully settled her into the most comfortable armchair, where the soft glow of a table lamp fell upon her like a benediction. I rushed to the kitchen, my hands shaking so violently I could barely hold the glass. I brought her cold water, holding it for her as her trembling hands threatened to spill it. She drank in small, desperate sips, and I watched, my heart breaking anew. After she drank, the dam broke. Alana collapsed against my shoulder, and her crying was no longer silent. It was a raw, guttural release of 30 years of pain, guilt, and loneliness. I held her tight, feeling every vertebra in her thin back, and let my own tears fall into her matted hair. I didn't ask any questions. I just let her cry, allowing the torrent of anguish to wash away some of the weight she had carried for so long. When the storm of her grief finally subsided into hiccuping sobs, she began to speak, her voice a broken whisper, her gaze fixed on the floor. Sister Simone, she murmured, I never thought I would see you again. Especially not like this. I took her hand, squeezing it gently, trying to pour all my warmth and strength into her. Tell me, Alana, I said, my voice firm yet tender. What happened? Why are you here? And so, she told me. Each word was a shard of glass, piecing together a mosaic of betrayal. She spoke of that night 30 years ago, when her editor, Darren Albright, had summoned her to his apartment under the pretense of discussing her manuscript. He had been drunk, his intentions turning predatory. In a frantic struggle to defend herself, Alana had grabbed a marble statue and struck him. Sister, I just wanted him to stop, she choked out. I didn't mean for that to happen. But the blow was too strong. He fell, hit his head on the table, and didn't move. Paralyzed with fear, she had been discovered by Jerome, who had arrived unexpectedly. Instead of calling the police, he had seen an opportunity. He told me I would go to prison for life, that I would destroy our family, destroy you, Alana whispered, her eyes filled with a haunted shame. He said he would protect me, for your sake. That night, he had disposed of Darren's body in the woods near the Ogeechee River and hidden Alana in our attic. What was supposed to be temporary became a lifetime sentence. Jerome, my charming, successful husband, had manipulated my sister's terror and her love for me to imprison her. He spread the rumor that Alana and Darren, who were having an affair, had run off together after he embezzled money. The world believed it. I believed it. And all the while, Jerome's literary career, the fame and wealth we enjoyed, was built on a foundation of my sister's stolen life and talent. The first few years were hell, Alana continued, her voice hoarse. To keep from losing my mind, I started to write. I created worlds where I could be free. One day, Jerome found her writings. Instead of horror or pity, his eyes had shone with avarice. He told her she had talent and commanded her to write for him. He would be her voice to the world. My husband was not a writer, he was a thief, a profiteer of pain, using my sister as his ghostwriter. I listened, a cold, hard rage crystallizing within me. I remembered Jerome's sudden passion for writing, the old-fashioned feel of his novels that I had always found curiously charming. Now I understood. They were charming because they were written by the young, hopeful woman Alana had been, her world forever frozen in the time before her imprisonment. Many times I wanted to stop, to turn myself in, Alana said, her voice gaining a sliver of strength. But every time, Jerome threatened me. He said that if I did, you would be the one to suffer the most. That you couldn't bear the shame and the truth. He used my love for you to keep me in that cage. I held her, my tears now ones of rage and a guilt so profound it felt like a physical weight. Forgive me, Alana, I wept. I didn't know. I never imagined. She shook her head, squeezing my hands. Don't apologize, sister. I let him manipulate me, too. I was afraid. I believed that protecting you was all that mattered. She explained the recent strange occurrences, the need to shower when we were out, the stolen food, the clumsy mistakes that left traces. Every mystery of the past few months was now solved, each one a desperate cry for help I had been too blind to decipher. Alana looked at me, her eyes clear and resolute for the first time. Sister Simone, I can't live like this anymore. I have paid for my mistake for 30 years in this prison. Now, I want to face real justice. I want to turn myself in. Her words were a final, devastating blow, but I understood. This was her path to freedom, the only one left. Through my tears, I nodded. Okay, Alana, I said, my voice catching. I'll take you to the police station. We will face everything together. The next morning, I dressed her in one of my own outfits, which hung loosely on her emaciated frame. We drove to the central police station, Alana watching the transformed world outside the window with the wide, bewildered eyes of a time traveler. At the station, her confession, delivered with a serene and startling clarity, sent shockwaves through the department. The case was reopened immediately. Following her directions, police found Darren Albright's remains in the woods. An arrest warrant for Jerome was issued. He was arrested without incident upon his return from Atlanta. I did not see him. The man I had loved was already dead to me, replaced by a monstrous stranger. I hired the best lawyer for Alana, one who was confident he could argue for clemency based on self-defense, prolonged manipulation, and her 3 decades of de facto imprisonment. I spent my days gathering things to make her detention more comfortable, clinging to the hope that we could still have a future, however small. That hope was shattered a few days later by a phone call. A cold, formal voice informed me that Alana Whitlock had taken her own life in her cell the previous night. The phone slipped from my numb fingers and clattered to the floor. My world, so recently reassembled, exploded into a million irreparable pieces. They gave me her last letter. Her handwriting, once so elegant, was now shaky and weak. Dear Sister Simone, when you read this, I will truly be free. For 30 years, I wrote to survive, to keep from disappearing, but I could never write under my own name. I lived as a ghost, and now it is time for that ghost to dissolve. I don't regret speaking the truth. It was the only right thing I did. Don't be sad. Think of it as I have finished the story of my life. The final manuscript is still in the attic inside a wooden box under the table. It is the only work I wrote about myself. If you can, please let it carry the name of Alana Whitlock. With all my love. Your sister, Alana. I fulfilled her final wish. I found the manuscript in the attic. It was her autobiography, a raw, beautiful, and heartbreaking account of her stolen life. I edited it with tears as my constant companion and fought to have it published. The book, released under her true name, Alana Whitlock, became a phenomenon. It wasn't just a story, it was a voice, finally reclaimed from the darkness. Jerome was convicted on a multitude of charges and sentenced to a long prison term, a hollow victory that brought me no peace. I still live in the Savannah house, but the attic is no longer a place of dread. I cleaned it out, put in bookshelves, and turned it into a bright library dedicated to Alana's work. I often go up there, open the window, and let the sunlight flood in. Sometimes, I can almost feel her there, not as a prisoner, but as a writer, her spirit finally at rest. Her story taught me a terrible, vital truth, that silence can be a crueler prison than any with walls, and that fear can make ghosts of us all in our own lives. But it also taught me that the truth, no matter how painful, is the only key that can ever set us free. Alana's voice, once confined to a dusty attic, now echoes in the hearts of thousands, a powerful reminder that no one should ever be forced to live in the shadows. This story, though based on a narrative, reflects a painful reality for many. The walls of silence can be as confining as any physical prison. If you or someone you know is feeling trapped in a situation without a voice, please know that you are not alone. There are people who want to listen and help. Your story matters, and your freedom is worth fighting for. If this story moved you, I would be deeply grateful if you could let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Which part resonated with you the most? And if you are able, consider supporting the channel so I can continue to bring you more stories that explore the strength of the human spirit. Your support makes this possible. Don't forget to subscribe for more, and you will find 2 other powerful life stories recommended for you on the screen now. Thank you for listening, and for being a part of this community.